In 1966, the Chicago Bears drafted the son of a Pennsylvania coal miner in the 4th round. Doug Buffone would go on to play 15 seasons for the Bears and later be named one of the 100 greatest Bears of all time. His allegiance to the Bears never waned, even when he took to the microphone and witnessed some horrendous Bears teams.
The fact is, there's not the fear put into them, because this game is a lot about fear. You either do the job, or you go home and go sell hamburgers at McDonald's.
Doug told it like it is, and that's part of the reason his nephew John has dedicated this show to Doug. And now John Buffone is spreading Buffone-branded beratements just like his uncle.
Being a Chicago Bears fan is like being in a toxic relationship that you can't get out of. I think I'm finally done, and then they come back and they say, well, things are going to be different this time. I've changed. We've got receivers now. We've got the quarterback now. And even though I've heard this song and dance before, I go back every time.
And he's got pep talks too.
I love this team. And I know everyone watching and listening loves this team. So while we may be pessimistic and cynical, every one of us still has hope that the stars will align at some point. And if that ever does happen, you'll be glad you stuck around.
John is telling it like it is here on Buffone 55. And joining John are Alyssa Barbieri, managing editor of USA Today's NFL Wires, including Bears Wire, and also Danny Shimon, lead game and draft analyst for the Barroom Network. Buckle up and bear down. This is Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Buffone 55. I am Alyssa Barbieri, managing editor of USA Today's NFL Wires, including Bears Wire.
And I'm Danny Shimon, the Barroom's lead game and draft analyst.
And I'm Aldo Gandia, and I clean up around here.
John has the night off and will be back here next Tuesday. And as you all know, the Bears finally did what many of us wanted long ago and didn't expect them to do sometimes. They fired Matt Eberflus. Danny, Aldo, and I will discuss Eberflus's firing, the promotion of Thomas Brown to interim head coach, the impact on Caleb Williams, the prospects for this team to finally win a game, and a lot more. But first, Aldo put together a video that helps us look back on what happened on that fateful Thanksgiving and everything since.
High up near the rafters. Bouncing. Is he going to be covered up? Is his foot on the line?
Get your vomit bags ready, because I'm taking you back to the fourth quarter of the Thanksgiving Day game.
What a punt. Let's see. Oh, I see green. Your losing streak, 5 games, been playing well, dominant in the second half, Caleb.
Trailing by just 3 points, the Bears start a drive on their own 1-yard line with 3:31 on the clock. They struggled to move the ball primarily because of penalties.
Unsportsmanlike conduct, number 13 in the offense.
But a 25-yard third down completion to DJ Moore, another Caleb to Moore pass, this one for 14 yards, a DeAndre Swift run for 12.
Swift got the first down, and he powers all the way down to the Detroit 49. Williams in trouble again. Splits the defense.
Caleb scrambled for 13.
Gonna fight Branch for every inch.
And a 29-yard pass interference call on the Lions' Kendall Vildor. And the Bears have a first down on the 25-yard line, holding 2 timeouts with 46 seconds to go. But the comeback stalls here. Caleb throws an incompletion.
Look at that.
On second down, he calls timeout. Then Tevin Jenkins is flagged for hands to the face, and the ball is now on the 35-yard line. Then the comeback doesn't stall, it implodes. Offensive coordinator Thomas Brown calls a quarterback draw, but Caleb is sacked. The clock continues to roll. The play came in, and Caleb made adjustments at the line of scrimmage, while the clock ticked and ticked and ticked. Caleb didn't call timeout. Head coach Matt Eberflus didn't call timeout. And not even Thomas Brown suggests to Eberflus that a timeout was needed.
Oh, this is disaster in the making here. You're going to have to do something when it comes down to this play. Incomplete, and the game is over. Completely botched at the end by the Bears.
After the game, there was widespread agreement that this was an entire team collapse, but the collapse could have been averted if the head coach had called a timeout.
Like, that's got to be on Eberflus right there.
What happened at the end of that game is inexcusable.
He gets sacked, timeout, boom, done. It's easy.
This is unacceptable. Yeah. From the head coach position, your responsibility is to not panic in critical situations, to put your team in the best opportunity to win games. That's a massive, massive fail by Matt Eberflus.
Then in the post-game press conference, the head coach sounded flustered.
Yeah, I have to look at the exact play. I got to look at the play right there. Again, I got to get to the bottom of that. I didn't see it.
He pointed the finger at players.
Again, there were some penalties there at the end. We were in position to score. We had a hands to the face. I think that was a pretty costly one. And then we just got to do a better job not taking negative plays.
And when he did hold himself accountable, it came off as inauthentic.
Well, I'm the head football coach, so I'm taking the blame. Of course, that's what you do.
Soon thereafter, reports started to leak that the players' frustration towards Eberflus exploded, and the dynamite was lit by star cornerback Jalen Johnson.
Right afterwards, Matt Eberflus started talking to the team, kind of almost washing it over. Hey guys, sorry about this, but this is the type of adversity we need. And immediately, Jalen Johnson, their Pro Bowl cornerback, interrupts him and starts speaking in very colorful language that I usually use off the air over here. And this went on for about 10-15 minutes.
Eberflus even lied about it when asked after the game.
A couple players said that you didn't have the normal post-game meeting in the locker room where you addressed the team. Is that true? And what would have been the motive?
No, we typically bring it up for prayer, right? We brought it up for prayer, and that's what we did, and we broke it down like we normally do. So it was same operation.
Was there a message that you delivered to them post-game?
Yeah, I said I know it's hard, I know it's difficult. We still have a lot to be thankful for, and that was it. Then we just broke it down.
There are reports that Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren were in the locker room and witnessed the mutiny. But the Bears brass tabled a discussion about Eberflus's immediate future until Friday morning. They called for a 7:30 meeting at Hallis Hall. In attendance was Chairman George McCaskey, Warren, the team president, and GM Poles, whose contract states that he's responsible for hiring and firings of the head coach. Flus was scheduled to talk to the media at 9 a.m. The media waited and reported over social media that at 9 a.m. there was still no link to the press conference scheduled to be held over Zoom. Finally, a link was sent, and Matt Eberflus answered questions for the last time as Bears head coach, except he didn't know it. And yet another in a magnificent mile length of mistakes, Bears executives were still determining his future and allowed him to address the media where he was drilled about his future as head coach. It was torture.
Are you confident that you're going to be keeping your job going forward into next week?
Yeah, like I said, I'm just going to be working on finishing up this game. Doing a good job of evaluating that, our after-action report like we always do, and then I'll be working into San Francisco. Again, those are conversations we'll have, and again, I'm confident that I'll be working on to San Francisco and getting ready for that game.
2 hours later, the Bears finally made their decision. But that's not all. The Bears brass decided to hold their press conference to announce their plans moving forward 72 hours later, and what we saw was disturbing too. Ryan Poles sat with a somber look, as if he was a student who had just been reprimanded by the school principal. And without saying so, Warren was clearly now the man in charge at Hallis Hall.
One, I remain grateful, energized to lead the Chicago Bears. I knew there would be days like this that would be challenging.
Just another great video from Aldo there. Just perfectly encapsulates everything that happened over the last several days, and starting with the firing of Matt Eberflus, which I know like Danny, you were really confident kind of going into this if there was some kind of collapse that, the Bears would pull the trigger. I was a little more skeptical. I didn't think they had it in them to do it. And I think that we can all agree that we're very glad that they did, but how they handled the firing is something else entirely. So how they had Matt Eberflus address the media at roughly 9:30 in the morning, and then 2 hours later fired him. Just how should that have been done, Danny? How would you have done that?
Right. Basically the Bears just Bears all over themselves. That's what they did, on Sunday or Friday morning. They should have just, obviously the Eberflus thing was scheduled at 9 a.m. It's a Zoom meeting. It's not like he was going to come up there. It's not like those reporters, in the conference room waiting for him. They could just set out, like say, when there's a delay, well, this will be pushed back for another hour, 2 hours, whatever, if they're up there, still meeting and all that stuff. But, that's how they typically should have done. They shouldn't have let him go out there and kind of look the way he looked. I mean, I think you could tell from his face that he kind of had an inkling something bad was happening. And I think that's kind of went from there. So, but do I feel bad for Matt Eberflus? I know as a human being, you feel bad for him just kind of being put out there and kind of, made to look like a goofball. But hey, we've seen him look like a goofball every Sunday for the past almost 3 years now. So I really don't feel bad for him. He's well compensated. He's gonna get paid next year. He's got a guaranteed contract. So was it messy? Yes. Does it look bad in the organization? Hell yes. But this organization continues to look bad whenever they have a chance to get out in the national media. And Alyssa, you're right. I predicted the Bears were going to do this prior to the season ending, but I thought it was going to happen after Detroit if Detroit put up like 50 points on the defense and the Bears were totally out of it. It was the opposite. The Bears made halftime adjustments, looked great in the second half. Caleb in the offense looked phenomenal in the second half. And then it's just Matt Eberflus flusing all over himself, and just becoming a national, humiliation. I mean, current players, former players. I mean, we saw the clips with Matt Ryan and some of the other, even Jimmy Johnson, and just lambasting the Bears. It became a national embarrassment. They had to go ahead and release him and let him go.
Yeah, it feels like there was no coming back from that too. And although I was wondering, what does that say? The way that they had handled the Eberflus firing, what does that say about the Bears as an organization?
Yeah, I think it's a joke. I truly do. I mean, all of us look at the Chicago Bears through our own prism, our life experiences and what it brings. And I've had the fortune of working with Fortune 500 companies, no pun intended, and learning from them how to handle business crises. Crisis management was something that I did. And it was clear the Bears were in crisis and they had no plan for how to handle it in a manner that would give faith in fans and also was fair to the head coach. That poor head coach, he lost his dignity. He was castrated there. And then the press conference with Warren and Poles, Warren should have allowed Poles to start the press conference and show strength. And instead, what we get from Warren is 8 minutes. And I included that clip where he's talking about himself. I am still proud to run this organization. These are the marks of a narcissist. And in my experience of having worked in corporations, Fortune 500 companies, there is a lot of people with that mentality at the top. That's how they've made it up there, by snaking their way all the way up to the top. And I believe now that, and people have told me this, and I'm like, nah, give the guy a chance and so forth. But I have seen it with my own eyes. I'm worried that this guy could do more harm than good for the Chicago Bears. Evidence of that is, where are the shovels? Where are the cranes? Why did this organization pay $200 million for the Arlington Heights property for you to come in 2-3 months later and say we're focusing in on downtown Chicago? This is malpractice. And on top of that, you look at the McCaskey brothers sitting there at the press conference. They are clearly not happy, but they aren't doing anything. This is their problem. They created it because of their hires, and now they have to fix it. And right now, I doubt that they can. I really do.
Yeah, the entire handling of that 72 hours from Matt Eberflus having to get up in front of the media, like how hard is it to just be like, hey, if you're in a meeting at that point and you are, like the fact that he could be fired is on the table, why are you going to put him up there in front of the media in case that is the decision that you come to? And just from that, and then like you guys are talking about with Warren and Pauls' press conference, which we're going to talk a lot about again, the way that they handled that, I mean, just the way that they had handled the Eberflus firing, Danny, do you think that because now, again, they're going to be conducting, the Bears are going to be conducting a search for a new head coach. Do you think the way that they hired that Eberflus firing could somewhat be detrimental to attracting any quality coaching candidates or even looking forward to free agency?
Yeah, and anybody interested in the job, any big name or any hot shot coordinator is going to want to come in and say, hey, how is this running? I want to see what the organization looks like, because from the outside, you guys look like a laughing stock, and they're going to have questions, and they're going to want those questions answered. And I have a little bit slight difference from Aldo, but I do agree the whole press conference thing was handled sloppily. And if you're a big company or you're Fortune 500 company, like the example Aldo gave you got to have everything lined up and in plan. But the one thing I took from this, although maybe Alyssa, you might agree or may not agree, but this was Kevin Warren putting his foot down, saying, I'm taking charge of the organization. Now that might be good, it might be bad. I think it's a good thing. We'll see what happens, because when Ryan Poles had his chance to make his hire, and he fell in love with Matt Eberflus, 2 days after he met him. And if you go back to his original quotes when he first met Matt Eberflus, talk about all the qualities that he had about him, none of those came true. So this is Kevin Warren saying, this is my show, I'm going to run it. And I think, we get to this later on. We talk about future, possible head coaching candidates. But I think this is something where Kevin Warren now says, I'm running this show. It's my show. Ryan Poles, you sit back here and you kind of come along for the ride. And it looked like in his body language that Ryan Poles was someone that looked like his power had been stripped from him. It might not be national, press clippings, or it might be announced nationally. It just looked from his body language and from the way he was reacting that he was someone that looked like his power in the organization had been kind of diminished. And now Kevin Warren was the big new boss in town.
Yeah, I'd like to add, PZ says that they probably had to convince George and Virginia of the move. And that, again, points to a problem. They should have had a plan in place. If this ever happens, we are going to put a call in that night. Wake up, Virginia, whatever, or very early in the morning, and go through this process. But I have to believe that they never gave a thought to the idea that this could potentially happen in season, and so therefore they had no plan. Alyssa and I were talking before the show. I wonder if at one point somebody in that meeting says, well, we've never fired anybody in season before, which is the dumbest thing to say. Just because you haven't done something before doesn't mean it's the right answer. And as Danny pointed out, and in the video pointed out, that there was this disruption in the locker room with Jalen Johnson going crazy and so forth. They witnessed that. How can they go have turkey dinner after seeing that explosion of negativity in the locker room and then put off having this discussion about Matt Eberflus's future until the morning? I have never been in a situation where I've seen high-powered, highly paid executives handle a situation like this. It's really, really sad.
Yeah, we talked about it too, like right before we hopped on, about like potential succession plans, and had Thomas Brown not really, stepped into the offensive coordinator role and had the players rally around him on offense, would the Bears have even went ahead and fired Matt Eberflus if Brown hadn't shown that and they felt that, okay, we can go to him to serve as our interim head coach and move on from Eberflus? So just complete lack of planning there. And I mean, just, talking about the Kevin Warren and the Ryan Poles press conference, I know that, Danny, you have a couple of clips that you want to talk about.
Yeah, this press conference, first of all, although I think you may agree with me, it was scheduled for 20 minutes. And then Kevin Warren comes out and starts talking about his speech about himself and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Takes up 8 minutes of that time, gives only 12 minutes to the media to ask pointed questions. And the PR department cuts him off exactly at 20 minutes, which to me pissed me the hell off because, there's a lot of questions that the media needs to know, because the media is asking questions that basically the fans, they're the conduit to the fans there, and the fans want to know what the hell's going on. They never got to, in terms of what kind of, candidates you're looking for. You're looking for guys with coaching experience. You're looking for, coordinators. You're looking for, college guys. They never got to that point because they cut them off at 20 minutes, which is a BS thing for that PR department to do. So that was the first thing. And then there was some awkwardness, and this is where I've talked about, Kevin Warren, putting his foot down, taking over control, because when they asked, although if you have the clip, they asked Kevin Warren who's running the search for the GM for the new head coach. This is what he had to say.
Final say was doing what's right for the best interests of the Chicago Bears. So I'm confident. I've never been concerned about final say or whatever. Ryan, he's general manager. He leads our football operation. He'll serve as the point person. We will be in contact, just like we were over the last 72 hours, in contact hours a day. We will spend multiple hours a day until we make this hire. So from a final say standpoint, I mean, ultimately he's the general manager, but I think in working together, it'll be very clear who's the right person for the Chicago Bears.
So what if you guys have dissenting opinions when it comes down to two people who someone's got to make that call?
We'll work that out. Yes, and again, Ryan he's the general manager. He's head of football operations, and so he would have the final say if it ever got to that point. But I'm confident that we will work through it, because the good thing about it, so long as we keep the center of our decisions what's in the best interest of the Chicago Bears, our players, as we go forward, it will become clear as far as who is the person should lead this franchise from a football standpoint, from a coaching standpoint.
So it took about 9 minutes there, almost 10 minutes to come out and say that Ryan Poles has the final say. And as Aldo put on in his video, Poles contractually has the final say. He hires and fires the head coach. So I think this is where I noticed the shift in dynamics where Ryan Poles sitting there with his head down. It took Kevin Warren 9 minutes to say, well, Ryan Poles technically has the final say, but he said we, and that's me. That's me thinking Kevin Warren's going to go out and make a play and go make this hire. Now, sure, Ryan Poles is going to go and make all the do all the due diligence in terms of request permission from teams and from so on and so. Talk to Ben Johnson, talk to Aaron Glenn, so on and so forth. He'll do all the technical stuff, but it's going to be Kevin Warren who's going to say, hey, we want this guy. Ryan Poles, you're on board. If not, and this is where I think it's going to come to, and maybe we should play Poles' part, and then I can come back to my conclusion. This is what Poles would say when they asked him the similar question.
Are you guys going to use either a consultant or a committee in your hiring, or is it just going to be the two of you?
We haven't made that decision, right now. So I think we're going to lean on both of us and our entire organization and everyone in kind of that think tank, and make sure that we make the best decision.
So Kevin Warren just said, we, and then finally he's going to make a final decision. And now they asked Poles, well, we haven't made a decision yet. We don't know if we're going to do a committee or we're going to talk about it. We'll do a think tank. It's all over the place. So again, that tells me Poles, he's going to be part of the process, but leading the charge is going to be Kevin Warren. And for me, the way I read into it is like, for example, just throwing him out there, say Mike Vrabel, he comes and says, hey, or Ben Johnson says, hey, you know what, Kevin Warren, I don't want to report to Ryan Poles because he has a 1-year contract left, and I don't want him to be able to fire me whenever he wants to. I want to report directly to you. And I think Kevin Warren's going to say, fine, you report to me, and Ryan Poles reports to me. Now we have both you guys, the coach and the GM, on parallel levels. And now guess what? If the coach gets popular and now they start winning, because this is a team that's going to go out there and look for someone that's going to be able to get them back on the winning track next season. This is not a total tear down and rebuild. We already did that with Matt Eberflus when Ryan Poles first got here. This is going to be a coach that's going to come in here and start winning next year. So that's why a coach that's already been a head coach before, has some coaching experience, has some coaching chops, or maybe a hot shot like a Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn, I think those are going to be the guys they're going to look at. And I think if push comes to shove, that new coach says, I don't want to report to Ryan Poles. I think Kevin Warren has no problem pushing Poles to the side and saying, all right, you report to me directly.
Listen, let me add, if you are a general manager candidate and you heard Kevin Warren, snake his way through those answers, you're going to be worried that if you come in for a job interview with the Chicago Bears, you're going to be worried that this guy is going to want to have say over head coaching decisions or want to work closely with you. The president of a football team is a sounding board. He's not the guy that makes decisions. Ted Phillips, if he made any decisions, clearly the evidence is there. They were awful. But he claimed that he didn't make any decisions. And so it seems like Warren is elbowing his way to the front of the line so that he can have decisions on the head coach, so that he can talk to the coaches and watch film with them and so forth and get involved. And as somebody asked in the chat, what has that guy done before? Well, he's a high-priced lawyer, was an agent, was hired by the Rams to help with administrative things, nothing having to do with that Dick Vermeil fantastic offense and that Super Bowl team. Nothing, although he talks about it like he was an integral part of it. And then with the Vikings, he had nothing to do with football operations. His responsibility was the building of that fantastic stadium, which by all accounts, he did a fabulous job. And that's why the McCaskies hired him. But he has since then walked his way into gaining McCaskey's confidence to have these decisions over football operations, and that worries me.
See, Aldo, I don't think he's going to have football. I don't think he's going to be in the draft room in terms of picking players. I think he's going to have. I think he's going to have to say on this thing right now, because this has been a disaster, and this is Ryan Poles is making. This is his coach, right? So I think he's going to say, all right, I'm going to pick this coach, or I'm going to help you pick this coach. And I think from then, he'll let Ryan Poles do his thing in terms of scouting and all like that. And if you bring in a guy like, say, Mike Vrabel, right? And then after a year, the Bears win and they go to the playoffs, and after a year, there's a tension between Vrabel and Poles. Well, I think I can easily see Kevin Warren saying, all right, Poles, you're gone. Vrabel, who's your guy you want in terms of your guy that can do your scouting and do your GM, if you will, in name only, but then he'll just pick your players and you coach the team. So I think he's setting up for that dynamic. I don't think he wants to get his hands involved in picking and trading players and all that. I think he'll still leave Ryan Poles for that. I just think he wants to clean this mess up that Ryan Poles helped create.
I can't help but wonder, too, if Kevin Warren kind of stepping into that and kind of taking charge had to do with, there have been some reports that Ryan Poles was the one that wanted to keep Matt Eberflus last offseason. And obviously we've seen how that worked out. So maybe, Kevin Warren's like, okay, no, this is my show now. You made the wrong decision. Now you're going to have to kind of vet it with me, and we're going to work together. We're going to collaborate. So, just like you said, Aldo, like he looked like just a schoolboy that had just been in trouble, just sitting there, just looking down, wasn't making eye contact, looked angry. He just looked like he knew that he was in trouble.
Yeah. And we saw on Hard Knocks how hard he took it when he had to cut Adrian Colbert. And so clearly Poles wears his emotions on his sleeve. But one of the things, and it bugs me that he did an hour and a half interview with this executive leadership podcast when he really hasn't proven anything, like he was super successful NFL executive. He still hasn't had a winning season in 3 years. But he has to know as a leader is that when you're out in public or anywhere near a camera, you have to exude confidence. For him to sit there and look like he has been chastised by his boss, it's just not a good look. He doesn't have the look of a strong general manager. And it pains me to say that because I have been in full support of him, knowing that he was a novice GM and wanting to give him time. But 3 years, I'm sorry, that's enough time for you to get your shit together, exude leadership, and say the right things in the press conference. This guy has not grown that much as a general manager. I hope that I'm wrong when I say this. I'm a Bears fan. I hope that I'm wrong, but that's the feeling that I'm getting.
No, I agree with you, Aldo. I'm 100%. And I think that's why Kevin Warren might have seen that and says, all right, let's step in here. Let's help you get this part of it right. And then we'll move on from here. But because I think he's seen some of those shortcomings there as well. Again, Ryan Poles is a guy, that was a scout, highly, thought of scout. And then was brought in here and interview process, got the job, and was he 36 when he got the job or something like that? It was really young. So he's been learning on the job, right? And there's some mistakes and there's some, some corrections and all this stuff. But I think that this is just something that, Eberflus was his first major decision. I think this is where Warren says, right, let's get this right. And once we get this right, then you can go ahead and continue on, and we'll see how we go from there.
Yeah, we're going to circle back to Ryan Poles here in a minute, but let's focus on Matt Eberflus and specifically where it went wrong for him as a head coach. Aldo, do you think it's that he's just not head coach material, or do you think that it was a specific situation or something that just kind of, because he did come into a rough situation in his first season where they're rebuilding and Ryan Poles tore the roster down. Do you think that he just wasn't cut out to be a head coach and some guys are better off coordinators?
That's a interesting question, because perhaps if he would have gone into a situation where he didn't have to start an organization over, maybe he'll get a job where a team is close to winning and maybe he can prove himself as a head coach. But I say that without really believing that that's true. The reality of the situation is that he has a very good mind for the science of the game, but he does not have any sense at all about the creative aspects of the game, which is the leading of men and figuring out how to communicate with them and coming up with plans that are going to inspire players and making game time decisions that are going to galvanize the team as opposed to have them members of the team yell at you. So I think Poles made this decision within 2 days. Now, he had known Eberflus for a couple of years, had networked with him and so forth. So he had that name in mind when he was given a list of 3 people to consider by the McCaskey search team. But clearly, you should have taken more than 2 days to make one of the biggest decisions of your life. My daughter is in the process of buying a home, and I'm like, take it easy, slow down. You don't have to make a decision today. There are no other bids going on. You can take your time on this. And Poles didn't do that. He did not do that, and that's bad.
Yeah, and Danny, do you think, kind of looking at this pattern that the Bears have had hiring head coaches, so it kind of seems like the next one is going to be an offensive mind. Like they always seem to kind of go, okay, the offense wasn't working, so we're going to go offense, and then, oh, we know it's a defensive problem now. So do you think that there is a common theme with who the organization chooses to hire and likes as a head coach? And we've heard this, quote, leader of men, which Matt Eberflus was supposed to be a leader of men. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think that that's an issue?
No, I mean, in terms of the previous hiring cycles with the Bears, again, this is where Kevin Warren, him being thrown into this little cycle here, we'll see how things turn out if they're differently at all. But yeah, I mean, if you talk about the pattern, defensive guy, offensive guy, defensive guy, offensive guy. So everyone expects us to be an offensive guy, and that's with Caleb Williams there, that's your centerpiece. That's the most important thing going forward in terms of getting him developed and progressing in his career. So I can see where that is, and that's where I got like Ben Johnson would make a ton of sense. But a lot of things we heard after the firing was the Bears looking for a leader of men, right? And that's a guy that can take command of the room, command of the entire football operations. If you want an example like the Steelers with Mike Tomlin, he's a guy who had his background in defensive back. He was a defensive back coach with the Buccaneers, but he's more of a guy that galvanizes his entire team. He's a leader of men, right? And if you're looking for someone out there that fits that bill, for me right now, right away, it's Mike Vrabel, right? He's a guy who's got that coaching chops, has a successful career. I think 54 wins, 45 losses in his career coaching the Tennessee Titans. Has got 5 playoff games, has won 2, lost 3. He's made an AFC championship game. So he's a guy that's come in here. He will change this culture. It will be a tough team, physical up front, both offensive, defensive lines. But the thing with him is, what is your plan for Caleb Williams? Who's going to be your offensive coordinator, right? Go back to look at what he's done at Tennessee when he was head coach. Matt LaFleur was his offensive coordinator, and Arthur Smith. Both guys went on to become, head coaches. Obviously, LaFleur with the Packers. and Smith with the Falcons. Now he's offensive coordinator with the Steelers now. So, his track record of getting, good, innovative minds is so far, from what we've seen with Tennessee is good. So that's a guy that's top of my list right there. But I mean, in terms of just going back to your question, Alyssa, yeah, it's just they want someone that can kind of come in here and not only just galvanize the entire organization and lead them, but also, help put a plan in place, whether it's an offensive guy or if it's a defensive guy or just a general football coach. What is their plan for Caleb Williams? How, and in terms of, if there's any sort of, if your offensive coordinator leaves, for example, what's your backup plan to that as well? So that's going to be very important, whether it's Vrabel, whether it's Ben Johnson, whether it's, Aaron Glenn, another one that's very highly thought of. And I'll get into this little tidbit I noticed after the game on Thursday, once we get into our head coaching candidates later on in the show.
There he is.
Yes. Oh, I know. You got plenty to say about him, Danny. And yeah, and like you said, I agree that obviously the most important thing here is Caleb Williams' development. So whoever is going in there to interview for this job, whether you're an offensive or defensive background, you need to have that plan in place for Caleb Williams. At the same time, we're hearing I'm already sick of it. The quote leader of men, from all these reports or from coming out of, well, they didn't quite literally say leader of men, but Jalen Johnson mentioned it too. And, someone that he's looking for. I just want someone who's going to go in there and help them win football games, because the Bears haven't had a winning season since 2018. And it's quite frustrating. But yeah, I think the most important thing is going to be have that plan in place for Caleb Williams. Can Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles get it right this time? And with that in mind, we're going to switch back to Ryan Poles specifically, how it relates to Matt Eberflus. Aldo, do you think that he should have taken more time in his initial search, when he made that decision to hire Matt Eberflus on the second day? Granted, Poles was just hired 2 days before, and there were already a final three with Eberflus and Dan Quinn and Jim Caldwell. So it's not like he had the opportunity to conduct a full head coach search, which he's going to have now. But do you still think that he should have taken a little more time to make that decision on Flus?
Yeah, you're absolutely right to point that out, Alyssa, because sometimes I'm critical of him, but I do recall back then, they were already behind coaching hires because of the approach that they took with the search committee, and they're interviewing GMs and head coaches together. That was a problem. They should have hired the GM and then let him do his search. But yeah, I think this is all totally screwed up. Again, I shared with you my experience working in corporate America, and one of the things that we did is we looked at I worked with human resources on a project, and we looked at all different ways to hire somebody. We studied that the Japanese will have a candidate for a high-ranking position spend a weekend with the head of the corporation and see them in social settings, meeting people and so forth, really getting to know somebody. How in the heck can you hire a head coach after a 2-day search? That to me just doesn't make sense. This organization, and I'm repeating myself, has to go through a thorough process of looking at all of their processes on hiring, on firing, on player acquisition and so forth, and they have to improve it, because I'm not seeing anything that is impressive. Somebody said to me, well, what about one of the greatest trades in Chicago Bears history? You know what? That was lucky. You had a desperate organization. Thank you, Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham, for taking advantage of that desperation. But there was lucky. There was no guarantee that they were going to get the number 1 overall draft pick again. And so there was a high element of luck in that. But when you look at their draft plans, Danny has said this, that they've built from the safeties inwards. When we all know that you should build from the trenches outwards, and you look at other moves that they made, like drafting Bayless Jones Jr. as opposed to some quality offensive linemen who were available after Bayless, what are you doing here? You're a former offensive lineman. You vowed in your opening press conference, you talked about the importance of developing players at the line of scrimmage, and you're going against your own word to get a speedy wide receiver from Tennessee who has no assurances that he could be a quality 3rd-round draft pick or even draft pick, period. So yeah, it's bad. I apologize for my rant, but I'm really infuriated by how this organization is going right now.
Yeah, no, I think you summed that up perfectly too. And Danny, I was wondering, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. I'm batting a cough here, so sorry about that.
He's a trooper. You
He
got this,
is.
Danny.
No, I mean Ryan Poles. I've been one of his biggest critics, obviously from second year in, and I've come around and said he's done some positive things. Although touch on the big thing, which was the trade with Carolina, netting DJ Moore and Darnell Wright and obviously Caleb Williams eventually. The Montez Sweat trade. I think that was a good thing. So I went down and wrote down, like, try to be fair. I'd even go into his draft classes yet, because I still believe you give him at least 3 years. Now his first draft class, obviously, I think we've seen the what's come out of that one. I mean, we got Kyler Gordon, who's a starting nickel back. And Brisker, who's a guy that safety that when he's on the field, unfortunately, actually, when both these guys are on the field, they can make positive contributions, but unfortunately, they're never healthy for a complete season. So those are two guys that I still have judgment in terms of what kind of players, what kind of impact players will they be. Obviously, Velus Jones is the 3rd round pick that he's already gone. Braxton Jones was a 5th round pick that has been starting a left tackle. Is he the future left tackle? Is he not? So his first class, there's still a lot of questions on it, but it doesn't look like there's any impact players coming out of first draft class. But you go over to the negatives, right? We touched on a couple of the positives. The negatives, first of all, Eberflus. They were hiring him. I'll touch on it. Within 2 days, he met him and Dan Quinn and then Jim Caldwell, and he picked Eberflus over Dan Quinn. So that's a one negative right there. And then Larry Ogunjobi, failed physical thing. That was his first free agent signing, and that kind of bombed there. Trading Roquan Smith for just a 2nd round pick, and then signing Edmonds, the linebacker, and 2 years later for relatively possibly like same money. That's another thing that I question. Like, is that a negative or a positive move? The Nate Davis signing, right? All they touch on the offensive line. He's a former offensive lineman, and the offensive line is still in shambles, right? Year 3 of this regime, and again, Nate Davis, another free agent bust in terms of his signing there. I'm sorry, Ryan Bates. The Buffalo Bills were going to basically cut the guy. Obviously, he had signed him to an offer sheet. They had matched it the year before, and he gave up a 5th round pick for him, trading a 4th round pick for Keenan Allen, who's an oft-injured veteran, aging receiver who had a great season last year, but he's in the last year of his contract. Is that wise to go ahead and trade a 4th round pick for a guy that may not be around after a year? These are some of the negatives there, and then obviously, one of the big things that never gets talked about, guys, is allowing David Montgomery to go to Detroit as a free agent, and then turning around and a year later signing DeAndre Swift, who in my opinion is not that good of not as good as a running back as as David Montgomery. 2 different skill sets, right? Not the same kind of runner, but I think Montgomery was a leader on this team. To let him go and they get nothing for him, I think that was key there. And something that I've kind of stuck with me, and although may or may not agree, and I'll say you as well, I think he overplayed his hand in the whole Justin Fields trade thing. I think if he had done it earlier on, he knew he was going to get Caleb Williams. I mean, there was no, we all knew there was going to be Caleb Williams was going to be number 1 pick, and they were going to use that pick to kind of reset the whole contract and everything like that. Go ahead and just trade him right away and gotten more for him, if you will. So there are a lot of mistakes that Ryan Poles has done. But again, he was a young, up-and-coming scout hired to kind of learn on the job, and that's what he's done. He got a couple of positive moves, but he's got a ton of negative moves. And I think this is where, again, Kevin Warren might say, all right, you messed up on that first hiring. I'm going to try and get this hiring, help you get this hiring right, and then you can continue now moving on in terms of adding talent to the rest of the roster.
Alyssa, one of the other things that really infuriated me is that there was a female reporter, who was trying to squeeze in the Trace Armstrong question. Listen to it right in the beginning of this video.
Final say was.
No, I'm sorry. It's here.
Are you guys going to?
You heard that?
Yep.
And she tried it again after that response, and these idiot other reporters talked over her, and she didn't. Well, she wasn't able to get that question in. That is one of the most important questions to ask these 2 clowns. What's going on with this agent? Is he really the de facto or behind the curtain general manager? Are you going to exclude Trace Armstrong clients from this search? You could ask 15 questions on that topic. And I'm sorry. I don't know if you know, Alyssa, who that reporter was, but it was, I'm just really feel bad that she didn't get that question in.
I believe they were the Colleen Kane from the Sun-Times.
Oh, okay. Well,
I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that. But again, this is what pissed me off about the PR department, cutting it off because they knew that was going to be a question coming up next, and they wanted to avoid it. Now, the only thing, and again, this is why I throw in Kevin Warren. Kevin Warren, to my knowledge, is not represented by Trace Armstrong. So all these hires were done prior to Kevin Warren arriving there. So that's another reason why Kevin Warren saying, I'm taking charge. None of this Trace Armstrong BS crap, his clients coming over here. So we'll see how it goes there. But I think that's another wrinkle there that I'm kind of in favor of, having Kevin Warren put his foot down and kind of, take charge of this thing.
Good point.
Yeah, I remember watching that, and I heard Trace Armstrong. I'm like, oh, go let her ask her question.
Yes,
because
please.
like Aldo said, the media are the conduit to the fans. Like, they're the ones that are asking the questions that we want to know. And just like Danny said, I'm convinced that's why they decided to cut it off. When they heard that, like, oh no, because we're not going to answer that. We're just going to cut this short. When they should have stayed up there and answered every single question that all of those reporters had. That is your responsibility and your job, because this is the mess that you're in.
Right, right, and that press conference should have gone until every single last question by the media was asked. There should have been no time limit. If you're going to let Kevin Warren ramble for 8 minutes to start off that press conference, then that thing should go on. And I don't know if they made a fuss about it in terms of the media room and all the reporters. I haven't heard anything about that, but that's what I've been. I'm like, listen, man, we need to ask these questions that the fans need to know answers to, and you just kind of cut us off like that. That was total BS, and that pissed me off right away when I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good handling of that.
Vizzo has a question here. Danny, do you think all this mess will prevent Ian Cunningham from landing a GM spot? And just let me add quickly, why does everybody think that Ian Cunningham could be a good GM? I mean, where is the evidence that he could be a good GM? Go ahead, Danny.
I think could be a good GM. I think.
Why?
This is why. And again, you're right. I have no solid proof. He hasn't run a team. He hasn't run an organization. But Ian Cunningham grew up in two organizations, in the Baltimore Ravens organization, behind, and I'm drawing a name on the Hall of Fame tight end GM, Ozzie Newsome. He grew up there. He learned under Ozzie Newsome. Then he went to the Philadelphia Eagles, and he learned under Howie Roseman. Right, two very well-respected GMs. And how do they build their teams? They build their teams from the inside out. They have a fortified offensive and defensive lines. And until those two units are solid, their teams aren't solid. And they put all their resources, all their money in those two spots. And I believe that if given his chance to run his own team, Ian Cunningham, coming from those two franchises, would do a great job in terms of building his team. Again, is there proof? Do I have anything that I can say, all right, look, let's right here. We don't know the decisions that he's made or that the Bears have made. How much of that has Ian Cunningham been involved in that? We saw that in some of the Hard Knock stuff that he was very pivotal and vital in terms of trying to get out there and communicate with other GMs, trying to set up trades, calling other teams, so on and so forth. So, if they do make Ian Cunningham the GM and Ryan Poles is let go, I would be totally fine with that. And then make Jeff King one of their band scouts, area scouts, should say, and make him the assistant GM. I'd be totally fine with that as well. So I think I have a feeling Ian Cunningham is he's his own person. So to answer your question, I think he's a guy that's impressed a lot of people around the NFL. He turned down the Arizona Cardinals job that went to Monty Ossenfort. So I think he's going to have. I think people are going to put him on the side and say, all right, they're going to bring him in, interview him just for his own credentials and go from there. I don't think this mess is going to ruin his chances of landing a GM job. I hope he doesn't leave, just because selfishly, I want him to be the GM here, take over from Ryan Poles when he's finally let go. But we'll see how that plays out in the offseason.
Well, the gentleman that you mentioned, Jeff King, now there is visible proof there because he was the one that arranged that trade so that we could get who was it, Austin Booker?
Austin Booker, yeah.
That was on Hard Knocks. We could see it, and so that to me is more evidence than anything I've seen of Ian Cunningham done, or that Poles is the only compliment that I recall Poles giving of Ian. And Alyssa, you might know better, is Poles saying he makes me stop and think because sometimes I want to rush things and so forth. And so that could be a good thing, but who knows? Maybe he stopped them from making a trade that we would have all loved. So we don't know.
No, I was going to add, because like you said, that he's the one that holds Poles back. And I remember it was one of these draft shows or behind the scenes, there's so many, or it might have been Hard Knocks, where, Ryan Poles wanted to trade up for Rome Odunze. And, Ian Cunningham was saying, no, just hold off a little bit, right? And they ended up obviously getting him at 9. So, it's not like concrete proof, but again, like you're taking a chance on a lot of these guys too as well. Like the Bears took a chance on hiring Ryan Poles. So, it's kind of like hit or miss though.
Another thing about maybe possibly getting rid of Ryan Poles is it just sets everything back. Getting rid of our GM. I talking about the scouts are up in the air. You're talking about the whole organizational structure. Talking about the from the meal preps, from the athletic training department, everything gets start all over again. And you don't want to do that. You have a young aspiring quarterback here. You have talent on the offensive side. You plug into some holes here and there with free agency and the draft picks. You get the right coaching staff. And I think this team can be competitive to win 9-10 games next season. So that's why it's not a total rebuild. So that's why getting rid of everything, clearing everyone out, I think that's something that I wouldn't do right now. And that's one of the reasons why I'm holding on to Ryan Poles, believe it or not, even though I'm not his biggest fan, because I don't want to just kind of cut bait and everything, because he has made some positive, transactions and brought in some talent. It's just the hiring of Matt Eberflus kind of set everything up to basically where we're at this point now, where we have players revolting in the locker room, and we have a dysfunctional organization, it appears like, from the outside looking in. But the right hires and the right personnel being brought in, I think this team could be competitive next year. And I think that's what Kevin Warren wants as well, because he wants a new stadium.
What do you guys think about the idea of Kevin Warren, basically telling Ryan Poles, here are your goals for 2025. If you don't meet all of these goals, or you don't at least come close to meeting the majority of these goals, you're gone. And the reason I say that is because there has to be some kind of measurement for when you keep an employee. My experience in corporate communications is you train the guy. If he makes mistakes, you tell him, all right, you made these mistakes and so forth. This is how you got to correct them. Let me suggest you get help from this person, that person. And then you let him go back out there and try to do his job. And then if he fails again and again and again, hey, it's over. I'm sorry. Get the hell out of here. Take the same bus out of town that Matt Eberflus took. So I just feel like Kevin Warren doesn't have these practices in mind. He says in the press conference, Ryan and I are going to work hours and hours and hours. Who cares how long you're going to work? What, it's going to mess with your golf game? Tell us concrete. What are your goals? How are you going to accomplish those goals? This is just poor leadership at the top.
Hence why I think that's why he's slowly phasing out Ryan Poles, because I think what's going to do is, if he brings in this head coach that's going to go ahead and again, I don't, to answer your question, although I don't think there's going to be a objective, hey, you win 9 games, you keep your job, or if Caleb Williams is an all-pro next year, you keep your job. I think he wants to see just development of the young players, right? It can help bring this young coaching staff in, or a new coaching staff in, and see if they develop these young players and they get better. If the team is winning, winning cures a lot of bad feelings, a lot of ill will, right? You see Caleb Williams playing better, your team's successful on the football field. I think that's going to make Kevin Warren happy. But I think what he's doing is he's bringing in this head coach now that's going to have, like I said earlier, I feel direct power to Kevin Warren. So if ever it comes to a point where the talent's not there, the drafting class is not coming up, not developing, and the head coach is like, I need someone else, easy to get rid of him, bring in a talent guy, and now the head coach runs this. He's the face of the franchise. He runs this organization along with Kevin Warren, and the GM is basically just a scout who's bringing in talent for the head coach. We see it happen a lot of times, but we see it with bigger name coaches, Jim Harbaugh in LA, right? Some of these other coaches that come in. So I think that's where this could be headed, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be like specific, like, hey, you need to win this many games or whatnot. But I think looking at some of the mistakes that Poles has made this year with Kevin Warren now being in this role. So are you going to address the offensive line for your young quarterback? Are you going to continue to shop in the bargain bin? Or are you going to invest in an offensive line to help your quarterback? This coaching hire, obviously, Poles will have the final say, but, Kevin Warren's going to be right there as well. So, and like you said, the incremental progress. I remember going back to Kevin Warren's press conference last year, where when they were talking about the decision to retain Matt Eberflus, and he kept talking about how year 3 was going to be key. And clearly there was not that progress, and that's why Matt Eberflus is out of a job. And Kevin Warren isn't tied to Ryan Poles. He's not the one that hired Ryan Poles. So I don't see that it would be too, big of a difference for him to move on. But again, he did draft Caleb Williams, and that does give him some leeway there. But he needs to go. He needs to show growth as a general manager in some of those areas that he did make those mistakes.
Good stuff. We've got some questions. We've got another segment or two before we move on to questions, or can we do?
Yes, we're gonna quickly, because hey guys, there is a football game on Sunday, and the Bears are gonna have a new head coach, interim head coach in Thomas Brown. And Danny, I was wondering, what kind of head coach do you think that we should expect from Thomas Brown? Because this is going to be an entirely new situation for him. He's used to, calling plays on offense, up in the box, and now he's going to be down on the field. What do you think we should expect from Thomas Brown, who's now going on the road in San Francisco, hoping to break the 6-game losing streak?
Well, what I expect to see an energized team. Actually, there was always an uptick when you make a head coaching change. You always the team always comes out the following week with some energy. And I think they're getting the 49ers at the right time. They're an injured, battered team, lost both their top running backs. Bosa's injured, Trent Williams is injured. So I think they're getting them at the right time. And I expect that uptick energy from the entire team because of the coaching change. The thing I'm looking for specifically with Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams, remember, Thomas Brown has been up in the booth. So he's had to kind of be able to kind of look at the whole picture in terms of the field. So I'm curious, the operation of how he's going to do this now in terms of calling plays. Is there any sort of regression by Caleb Williams and the offense, because Brown now is on the football field and he's a head coach now, not just the offensive coordinator. So, but my hope is that the offense continues to get better, that we continue to see the progression that Caleb has made in the last 3 weeks, and that they now with the energized team, a better effort from the defense, with Eric Washington calling the defensive plays now. Hopefully we have combined effort. Where before going into any of these games, I did not see the Bears have a chance to win any of these games. Now, with that energized buzz that's going to go into this week, they could be able to go out there and pull off a victory in San Francisco. And heck, the following week they're playing the Vikings, I believe, and they almost beat them here. Took them to overtime. So anything's possible. And if you get a 1 or 2 games winning streak, then next thing you know, that the team could believe in each other. And it's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, is it going to happen? Probably not. But it's not that out of the realm that this team could run the table and finish the season 9-8. Will that make the playoffs? Probably not. But I'm just saying, I could see that here, because what Thomas Brown brings, he brings that leader of men. You've heard things from Andrew Whitworth, you've heard things from Sean McVay, even Jalen Johnson, even TJ Edwards, defensive players have said that they love his energy. They love how he's direct, or how he kind of just, takes the team and everyone listens to him. Everyone wants to follow him. So quite the contrary from what we heard about Matt Eberflus. This is what Thomas Brown's going to bring, and I think that's going to be a little buzz that we're going to see, possibly maybe a win or 2 here, maybe even 3 or 4, depending on how it goes the rest of the year. But I think just the Caleb progression, the offense continuing to get better, maybe a little bit more, a better effort from the defense, and maybe pull off a couple wins here. And I think Thomas Brown then, could equate himself nicely in terms of possibly being the next head coach.
Yeah, I have to echo that. I really am enamored. I got a man crush on Thomas Brown, I got to tell you. But at the same time, I don't want to dismiss the fact that he has made mistakes in his 2 games as the offensive coordinator. I'm not a play calling expert by any means, but I just feel like there were some issues, particularly with getting plays out there quick enough for Caleb to do his thing. So those are things that have to be ironed out. We saw that he took responsibility for the clock management. Kudos to him. He said he wasn't exempt from the mistakes that were made at the end of that Detroit game. So I want to make sure that he displays really good clock management, and therefore there aren't any mistakes that can be attributed to the coaching staff. Those are the major things for me that I'd like to see Sunday against the Niners.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, just kind of looking at what's coming up too. Normally playing San Francisco would be difficult, but this is an injury-ridden team, but you're still on the road. And I am curious to see how he's going to handle, obviously being the head coach, and then obviously still calling plays on offense. But I remember just watching his press conference, he's already completely different head coach than what we've seen from Matt Eberflus. It was refreshing going from watching Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles talking to Thomas Brown. You can tell why the players really do gravitate around him. And it'll be interesting to see how he does fare these last, 5 games coming up. They still have to play the NFC North an entire time, but you could argue if someone else was, calling the shots at head coach instead of Matt Eberflus, how many of those do they win? Maybe they win all 3. You can certainly make a case. So, but with that in mind, could Thomas Brown perhaps be one of those candidates that we're talking about when this head coach search begins in the offseason? So, Danny, I'm curious, who are some of the head coach candidates that you're already looking towards?
Yeah, I already touched on a couple of them there. Where Mike Vrabel is my top guy. Obviously, we talked about his record, his success as a head coach. 54 victories as a head coach, 45 losses. 2-3 in the playoffs, and he's a guy that late game situations. I remember that vividly, where that I believe was Tom Brady's last game with the Patriots as quarterback. I mean, he pretty much outsmarted Bill Belichick in that playoff game, and then they end up winning that game. The Titans, and eliminating New England. That was Brady's last game with the Patriots. So he's a guy that's coming here, leader of men. What you're going to have. You're going to have a physical run defense, a defensive line. You're going to have a physical offensive line. My big question with him is, what is your plan with Caleb and any offensive coordinators you're going to hire? Obviously, the next guy, we've got to go to Detroit. So my first guy is Vrabel. My next 2 guys are in the Motor City here. Ben Johnson. Obviously, I've been talking about this guy for about a year now. He's the guy that runs that show there for the Lions, the high-powered offense. We saw it this past week, guys, and I told you last week to keep an eye on the formations. A lot of their formations are all bunched up, tight formations, and you can't tell whether it's run or it's a pass play that they've called there. So he does a great job of disguising that. Now, obviously, he's got a great offensive line, right, built there with Penei Sewell and all those guys. So that's something he's going to have to come in here and clean up and fix right away. But my big question with Ben Johnson, obviously, never done it before, right? He's a guy that up until now, up until the last couple of years with Detroit, hasn't really been out there as a big name head coaching candidate. Now he's been picky. He's a guy that's withdrawn from consideration for 2 jobs the last 2 years. I think Carolina was one, and I believe Washington was another one last year as well. So Ben Johnson is a guy, but again, first time head coach, a lot of questions, but he's a guy that has been compared to the next young Bill Walsh. Is that true? We won't know. And then Aaron Glenn, and a defensive coordinator. And let's like we talked about earlier with the Bears pattern, offensive guy, defensive guy, offensive guy. And again, Vrabel and Glenn kind of clash in terms of that thought process. But again, Glenn is a guy that leader of men. He's a guy that will bring an energized effort. I think the team will follow, will rally around him. But again, just like with Vrabel, what is your plan at offensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn? And if he leaves, if your offensive coordinator is successful and he leaves, what's your backup plan as well? The one thing I wanted to point, I don't know if you guys caught this on Thursday after the game, Aaron Glenn pulled Caleb Williams aside, and they had a brief conversation, maybe about 30 seconds, something like that. And you could tell Glenn was just kind of heaping praise and kind of just encouraging Caleb to continue to play. And I'm assuming he was just kind of telling him, hey, you had a great game. And Caleb just kind of nodded his head. And so there's looks like some admiration there between Glenn and Caleb Williams. So that's something to keep in mind there in terms of the combination. And Thomas Brown for me is another guy candidate. I think if he goes, 3-2 or 4-1 or whatever, I think he's a guy, or if he goes 2-3, I think he's a guy that should get consideration because of what he's done so far with the offense. Now, again, a lot will go on and going forward the next 5 games. And although you brought up a good point, I want to see the mechanics of being the head coach, right? I want to see the challenges. I want to see late game situations. How does he handle those kind of things? So I think that would also go a long way. Besides just Caleb getting better and the offense continuing to put points up, that'll go a long way to determining if Thomas Brown is a candidate there as well. So those are my guys. The one thing I will say, and again, going back to Kevin Warren, and maybe I'm just looking over. I'm over my skis here. I'm looking too deep into this, and you guys can shoot me down right away. But Kevin Warren's out there looking for that stadium. He's looking to make a splash, and there are a couple of names out there, veteran coaches that no one thinks. There's always 1 or 2 that kind of comes free or is available, and no one thinks they're available. 2 names to keep an eye on. Again, just my kind of like looking into my crystal ball here. I always talked about Kyle Shanahan. with San Francisco, if he becomes available. John Harbaugh with the Ravens. If the Ravens do not win a Super Bowl, I think there's a possibility that that's something that he could come available. Not that they're going to fire John Harbaugh, not that they're going to fire Kyle Shanahan, but if you hear through the grapevine that either one of these guys can be had, now you have to give up compensation, right? Whether it's a second-round pick or whatever, you have to give up compensation and get them. But those are two veteran guys to keep an eye on, possibly, if Kevin Warren is what I'm thinking he's trying to do, make a big splash and bring in a big name here.
Mike Florio actually floated the idea of the Bears potentially calling the 49ers and trying to work out a deal for Shanahan. And he wrote that it might take 2 first-round draft picks. I want to see the expression on your faces. Exactly. All of a sudden, Daddy. Absolutely.
I can't give up 2 first-round draft picks.
No
I love
way.
the idea. I'm not doing it. No.
Absolutely not. All right. I am going to bring up some questions that I've been noting down during the course of the show. J2K says it's a very attractive head coaching opening, but I'm not that excited about the name so far. So I'll ask you, Alyssa and Danny, what do you think about the names? Do you think that this turn of candidates this year might not have the names that we'd like to see?
I mean, I think that frustrates me is that, this isn't the year that Jim Harbaugh was available, because that is exactly the kind of hire that we talked about it last year, that we wanted the Bears to go and explore that opportunity, that possibility with Harbaugh. And we've seen what he's done with the Chargers. He just goes and he wins wherever he goes. But, looking at this, it doesn't, currently, I know we still have some time left in the season, but it doesn't seem to have some of the bigger names that we have seen in years past. Obviously, Ben Johnson is the belle of the ball right now, so he's going to garner plenty of attention, and he's probably at the top of my list right now. But yeah, it does seem to be kind of lacking, and this is not a good year to be needing a head coach. But we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna continue to do my research as well and continue to watch games. So we'll see. But it does seem like it's a little bit down this year.
Well, J2K, I love your contribution to the show, but I mean, who would excite you then? I mean, who besides last year, Jim Harbaugh, who out there was exciting? Was a couple years ago, Shane Steichen, that excite you? Look what he's done with the Indianapolis Colts, right? There are other, you have to give these coaches a shot in order to come here and contribute. Now, Mike Vrabel excites me. I don't know about everybody else here, but that's a guy that proven winner will come in here. I know what we'll get from him. He's a guy that's going to change the culture. He's going to build, like I said, the strong offensive, defensive lines, and he's going to build that culture. And it's going to be a tough, physical football team. Now that excites me. Ben Johnson excites me and he scares me at the same time. We talked about it a little bit here. We talked about innovation in terms of how he's done and what he's done with Jared Goff. But again, he's only worked with veteran quarterbacks. How is he in terms of developing young quarterbacks? Does he want a young quarterback? Does he even want to develop a young quarterback? Does he want to go to a veteran situation where he's got a veteran quarterback already sit there ready to go? So, but he also has never been a head coach before, so we don't have that track record, right? Aaron Glenn excites me as well in terms of that leader of men, the guy that can galvanize a football team. But again, we talked about first-time head coach, right? He's a guy what's his offensive coordinator going to be? So all these guys have question marks coming in. Matt Eberflus never excited me when they hired him. Dan Quinn could have possibly excited me a little bit, but it's just a matter of just doing your due diligence, going through a thorough search, and just having seeing what these candidates have to offer, and seeing, most importantly, what is their plan for Caleb Williams? How are they going to go ahead and get this kid's career track up, projecting upward and developing him into what we could all see is a potential, a Pro Bowl type caliber talent, right? So that's what's going to be more important here. So, the names typically aren't sexy because these guys are usually like offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, linebackers coaches, so on and so forth. We don't see them, you don't interact with them day to day, but that interview process is going to be key. So there are no big names like Jim Harbaugh out there. So we're going to have to kind of, unless Mike Vrabel, but we're not going to have to kind of go and break down and see what these guys do, how they bring it in, what is their plan for the Bears, and how are they going to build an organization around Caleb Williams.
And I had a question for you guys, because I saw a name that people were floating around, Bill Belichick. Do you think that there's any reason the Bears should entertain that at all?
No,
I'm out.
I don't think so. First of all, I think he's well past his prime, and he proved that after Brady left. Secondly, I think his personality is so big, and I wouldn't mind having a big personality, but his personality and his quest for power would make him a very difficult person at Hallis Hall to contend with, and for even Kevin Warren to contend with. That there would be a lot of fireworks there. And third, the guy was such an a-hole when he was at New England. He was fined $500,000 for something, the camera stealing things. I want to find a guy to be head coach who is somebody I can tell my grandson to, that guy is a quality person and a fantastic head coach, as opposed to saying, yeah, we won because this Bill Belichick guy who was a cheater at New England came over here and cheated us to a title too. I'm sorry, I'm an old fogey now.
One more name of a hot coordinator is Joe Brady from the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I like that guy.
He was the guy that was with Sean Payton in New Orleans, went to LSU. Obviously, Joe Burrow had that great year at LSU. Was the offensive coordinator, got the offensive coordinator job with Matt Rule at Carolina. That kind of fell apart, got fired, was hired as a quarterback's coach with the Buffalo Bills. Actually, I think he was in contention to be a quarterback coach here under Matt Eberflus, and he picked Buffalo instead. So he's there, and now he's the offensive coordinator. Once he took over last year for Ken Dorsey, that offense has been nonstop. And remember, they've gotten rid of Stephon Diggs. They went and rebuilt that there's weapons for Josh Allen. Now you do have Josh Allen, a quarterback, again, but again, I think Joe Brady is a guy that's going to get a lot of head coaching interviews. Again, what he comes up with in terms of his plan. The reason why picking an offensive guy might be easier for the Bears is because now you have a guy that's going to be here, is going to be growing with Caleb Williams, and he can always go and get his defensive coordinator. You can go get a Robert Saleh, come coordinate your 4-3 defense, or whoever else they want to come out there, bring in and be your defensive coordinator. So I think that's going to be the path that they prefer, but we'll see what happens with these interviews and if anyone knocks their socks off.
There was another name that was being floated around by Ian Rappaport, which Cliff Kingsbury is someone obviously that has ties to Caleb Williams. Do you think that he's someone that will be a serious contender for this job?
I don't think so. And here's the reason why. You look at Kingsbury one-loss record, the second half of his seasons are all losing seasons. And that's because teams figure out, defensive coordinators figure out how he is running the offense. Now, Washington did have an explosive offensive day on Sunday, but for the majority of the times of his history, the second half of seasons, defensive coordinators have figured him out. Secondly, he had nothing good to say about his interview with the Chicago Bears, so I doubt he will even be on the interview list. I love the idea of somebody who has worked closely with Caleb, and he wasn't a terrible coach at Arizona. So if he was hired, I wouldn't throw around my microphone in anger, but I think there are better candidates than him.
I would throw my microphone anger out the window because Cliff Kingsbury, like you said, although he's a guy that his system gets caught on real quickly, and it's downhill from there. We saw what happens at Arizona. This is the guy that couldn't win at Texas Tech with Patrick Mahomes, guys. So why the hell do I want him as my head coach here? So no Cliff Kingsbury. I know they had that 1 year at USC. I'm good. Stay in Washington or go somewhere else. I do not want Cliff Kingsbury here in Chicago.
I'm not rooting for that to happen, but I'm going to need video of you throwing that microphone out the window.
It's not going to be pretty, I tell you.
No, let's not do that.
No. Let's not make the hire.
J2K didn't get a chance to respond to your question about who he might be excited, but earlier, about a half hour ago, he did post this. I worry Ben Johnson is the next Josh McDaniels. Too much talent on Detroit offense that isn't going to come with him. Same with his coaching staff. Who gets allowed to leave Detroit for Chicago? You know what? I totally agree with him. I posted this on Twitter. If he's going to bring his offensive line with him, then I'm all for it. Yeah, that's the key.
That's the key right there. If he's bringing his offensive line, that's the only thing he's missing here that he has in Detroit. I think he has a better quarterback, potentially a better quarterback. He's got better skill receivers, skill outside with Roma Dunze and DJ Moore, better than, I think Amon St. Brown is right up there with DJ Moore. But in terms of tight end, he's got Cole Kmet. I think he's got weapons to work with here, but the offensive line is key there, although you hit it on the spot. If he can come in here and he can build an offensive line in year one, I think he can then bring that offense here to Chicago. And I think obviously he's going to get rid of DeAndre Swift because he's not the type of runner he likes. I shouldn't say that. He likes more of a balance, thunder and lightning kind of. So he could be a running back in committee kind of thing, but it's going to be based off of the running game. It's going to be a lot of play action and a lot of rollouts. I think Caleb would be sensational in that offense. And I think he does have the weapons here. He just doesn't have the offensive line.
Yeah, that's going to be on Brian Poles this offseason.
Exactly. Travis has an interesting question. Do y'all think Poles can't find an offensive lineman because he looks for guys like he was, a soft offensive lineman who might not make it? Travis, come on.
That's
a shot.
That's pretty factual, to be honest with you. I mean, he hasn't really found an ass-kicking offensive lineman yet.
Yeah, he's living vicariously through Ryan Bates.
It kind of feels like Tevin Jenkins has that mentality, but he can't stay healthy, and his play is, regressed this season. So, but yeah,
Tevin wasn't Ryan Poles. He wasn't a Ryan Poles selection. He was a Ryan Pace selection.
That's right. Yeah. Don Burr wants to know from you, Danny, about Jesse Minter, the Chargers defensive coordinator. I think this is his first year as DC, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
He's got experience. He's been in the NFL with John Harbaugh and the Ravens. Went to Michigan. Was the Michigan DC there? First year as DC here with the Chargers. Too early for me with Minter. I know he's a young and up and coming bright mind. But to me it's too early. Talk about a guy first time DC in the NFL. Go to head coach. I think that's a too quick jump. We saw what Brandon Staley, what happened with him. Obviously you have to, if you're at DC, you're gonna have to make connections here in the NFL, maybe a couple of years, so you can have the networking ability to go ahead and get your offensive coordinator, get your quarterbacks coach, I don't think he's made that connection yet. Now, again, he's had NFL coaching experience in the past, but I think it's too early for me with Minter, and that's too big of a risk. Bright, up and coming, young defensive coordinator, just not this year for me.
Couple more questions here. Travis wanted to know if Lincoln Riley gets fired at USC, would you like him as Caleb's OC? What do you guys think?
Who's that coach? That's a more important thing. Who's that coach?
Yeah, right.
So that's not with Mike Vrabel. Is even if you or Aaron Glenn, if Thomas Brown the offense continues to progress, it's not out of the question that they could maybe interview Thomas Brown and keep him here as the OC, and that keeps that continuity that we want for Caleb. So, that's one of the things with some of the defensive guys is, maybe Thomas Brown could be an option there if he wants to be an OC here in Chicago. So we'll see there as well. But yeah, Lincoln Riley, again, college guys really don't do anything for me, guys. I'm not out there, pounding the table for any college coach to come in here and take over and kind of run the ship here. So I know he don't want to be the OC, but I'm not interested in that. I want NFL proven coordinators or previous head coaches with coaching experience.
Danny's got me coming around to Mike Vrabel and Thomas Brown.
Assuming
that he continues that development with Caleb.
Kevin Warren wants to win next year. This is not a tear down rebuild. No. So you got to bring in someone that's going to be a win next year. So it's got to be a guy like Vrabel. It's got to be a guy like maybe a Ben Johnson, maybe an Aaron Glenn. You can't go getting these first, second year, OCs like the Liam Cohens and all these guys. I don't want to give one of these guys a 1 or 2 year offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators, their shot to learn on the job again, like an Eberflus. I want a guy that's been been in the trenches. Whether it's Ben Johnson, the new hot shot, or Mike Vrabel, a former coach that's coming here and hit the run running. Because I said, Kevin Warren wants to win next year, and it's imperative for Ryan Poles and everybody else in the organization that they win next year as well. This is not a tear down and rebuild.
Yeah. Bear Cigars, this is the last thought from the chat room that I'll share. Bear Cigar says, I'm rooting for Thomas Brown. Everyone is overlooking him, but Brown is very well respected in this league, and I think he can bring a good staff. I am rooting for him. And that's, for me, exactly what I'm doing, Bears and Cigars. I am rooting for Thomas Brown. There are so many reasons to root for him. First of all, it appears that he is truly a leader of men. Secondly, his press conferences have been like a course, a master class on how to handle the media, how to project leadership skills, and so forth. Third, the continuity between him and Caleb, you can't state how important that is. Fourth is, hey, why not build from within? The idea of having to bring somebody from the outside because they might have proven success doesn't always work. And sometimes when it does, it takes a while. It's very disruptive. So I am for Thomas Brown 100%. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm there with you. Although I'm also rooting for Thomas Brown. That's why these next 5 weeks, the Bears did me a favor because instead of making me watch Eberflus get up there next 5 weeks, that was the things that Thursday. You should see the range of emotions on Thursday. I went from pissed off to laughing out loud because of how Eberflus looked at the end of the games, looking at he's expecting some like extra, like soccer, extra time, penalty time to come back on the clock, and he's going to be able to, call that timeout or whatever. But, then I was laughing. And then I was like, like worried. I'm like, are they going to bring this guy out back again, another 4 more games, and we have to deal with this guy? And the next day I was anxious, and then I was relieved when I heard he was fired, because now we can look forward to watching what the Bears can do. We can look forward to Thomas Brown, see how he handles his team. Is he a head coach in a possibility there as well? So, yeah, I am rooting for Thomas Brown as well. I mean, that would be perfect if he could go ahead and keep Thomas Brown as head coach, get the continuity there with Caleb, and he can bring in his own, if he wants to change the defensive coordinator, bring in his own staff, do all that stuff as well. Again, Andrew Whitworth, a well-respected veteran, tweeted out that this guy could be, in his opinion, that Thomas Brown is the Mike Tomlin of the offensive side. So, I mean, again, just a guy that can galvanize the entire team, a guy that's always cool, calm, and collected. Although you hit it on the head right there again. When I watch Eberflus's press conferences, I couldn't watch him anymore. They were just unwatchable. Thomas Brown has me mesmerized. I'm sitting there actually like this, listening to him, and like, reading, like, he had a comment about keeping everything in house, right? He says something about, he's got great neighbors, back home in Charlotte, but he doesn't tell them their business. It's not their business. He keeps everything inside the house, right? So even that little there had me like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. A cool way to kind of, let that out there. So, it's just the way he talks and everything. So obviously we want to see progress. We want to see the team kind of, play well underneath him. And we touched on earlier the mechanics, the challenges, the late game decisions, all that as well. But yeah, I definitely think he has a shot here at keeping his job.
Alyssa, at Bears Wire, you need to do a post where you put Thomas Brown isms, because he's got so many pithy sayings. Like, for instance, football is a violent game, and it rewards the most violent. I mean, you start with that one. That is like Lombardi-ish. It's beautiful. This guy says the right things, and he says it in a way that it's an aura, as Caleb said.
Yeah, I love it. I need something to replace the hot seat watch now, because, man, that was fun while it lasted, which wasn't for too long. But
no,
I agree with you guys. Like, it's so easy to root for Thomas Brown, and it's easy to see why even after one team meeting, you hear defensive players who are coming around to him. It just seems so, it's not forced. It's so natural, the way when he gets up there, when he's talking to the media, and like Danny was saying. And I think that this is perfect, that this is going to be the best opportunity that any of these coaching candidates are going to have, because the Bears are going to get to see him in action for 5 games as that head coach. And if he's able to pull out, a winning record during this streak, which is going to include some tough games against some playoff teams. I think all of them, except for maybe the Niners, are currently in the playoffs right now. So I think this is a really good opportunity for Thomas Brown to show that he can manage it all. We'll have to see, because he hasn't coached a game yet. But that's why I think this game against San Francisco is going to be a big one this Sunday, regardless of win or lose. Just how does Thomas Brown look in that head coach role? And could this be the beginning of something special? And with it, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. Go.
No, yeah, exactly. Like you said, we just want to see how this team, responds to them. Like I said, they're getting the 49ers at a perfect time here, where they're kind of battered and beaten and downtrodden after that, that miserable game there in Buffalo, and then go out there, get that victory there against the 49ers. Even though they're 5-8 or whatever the record is now, but they're still a team that was in the Super Bowl last year, right? So you go out there, you make a positive, get a positive win there, you get the team feeling better about themselves. You go to Minnesota, a team you almost beat here. Now you're playing up there. So let's see how that continues. And if you get on this little streak and you build this confidence, I could see these Bears, putting together, 3-4 victories possibly of the remaining games, and then moving forward here with Thomas Brown.
Did you guys get a chance to listen to Sean McVay's endorsement of Brown?
I read it. I didn't hear it, but I did read it.
I posted the video on X. And, a lot of people said, well, what do you expect he's going to say? He used to, they used to work together. He's going to, and I'm like, no, you don't go out of your way for 2 minutes to talk and give you examples of why this guy is a great leader. And he handled the second question and he went on. This felt very authentic. And I think one of the reasons Sean McVay is one of the best coaches, not only in this era, but maybe any era, is because he tells it like it is. He isn't going to bullshit you. He has the confidence of players that he is not going to throw stuff out there like Eberflus did. This guy is straight up, and he's complimenting Thomas Brown for being straight up as a leader too. So I was very excited by that.
I said it before. This is not just this year, guys, and for those who have missed it, like, you know, in the scouting community, you hear positive things about coaches, and Thomas Brown's name always came up. He was a guy that's you know, really thought of highly in the scouting community, you know, in terms of, you know, a guy that communicates well, a guy that a lot of people have said he's a future head coach material. So that's why when Carolina got him last year, I'm like, oh man, that's a guy that possibly could have been, you know, available in a couple of years. And then when he was available here, when they hire him here, I was shocked. You know, like, I know he interviewed for the OC job. But then obviously went to, you know, the great Shane Waldron there, and then all of a sudden they made him the passing game coordinator. I was excited. I'm like, all right. I'm like, they have a plan here in terms of if Shane flops, they'll put in Thomas Brown, and sure enough, that's what happened here. But Thomas Brown is not a guy that just came out of nowhere. He's a guy that's highly thought of, highly respected in the football community, and I think a lot of people have said he will be a head coach. You know, I'm not sure his time is now or next year, but he will be a head coach in this league.
Yep, I agree.
And maybe, who knows, perhaps it'll be in Chicago if he's able to pull this out here in the last 5 games of the season. But okay, let's put a stamp on this episode of Buffone 55. Danny, what's happening with your college football scouting, and what do you recommend us watch this weekend?
Oh, big game. Big Saturday. This is going to be conference championship Saturday. I'm going to be planted on the couch, you know, watching football all day long. You know, the Penn State Oregon game for Big Ten championship is going to be up there. You know, Clemson versus SMU. I haven't had a chance to look at SMU yet. That's going to be a big game there for ACC championship. You know, Iowa State versus ASU. And then, but the game I'm going to be concentrating on is Georgia versus Texas in the SEC championship. And I'm going to be looking squarely in the middle of that line of scrimmage. I'm looking at the 2 defensive tackles from Georgia, Vernon Brunton, the 6'4", 305 pound, lightning quick defensive tackle. If you guys watched the game last week versus Texas A&M, he was all over the football field. Quickness off the snap, you know, while swim move gets skinny, gets into the backfield. He causing havoc. 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. And then Alfred Collins, you know, big number 95, you know, 6'5", 320, 34 3/4 inch arms. They're going to be going up against my top-rated center right now going into this process, and that's Jared Wilson from Georgia. Although I reached out to you, I said, you know, keep an eye on this guy, Jared Wilson from Georgia, number 55. I love this kid. He's an aggressive guy. Watch him finish at the next level. This guy will bury guys into the ground and those linebackers or those little, you know, DBs come up to him. So I love that battle inside on the line of scrimmage there between the 2 defensive tackles for Texas and that big center there, Jared Wilson from Georgia. That's what I'm going to be looking at.
And Aldo, can you give us a little preview of what's happening tomorrow on Bare Your Souls?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you folks have heard, but Dan Aguirre is no longer on our Bare Their Soul show. His schedule got to the point where he just couldn't handle doing a weekly show. He works over at 911, and like all government services, they're asking you to do more with less resources. So he is working 12-hour shifts now, and so he can't do the show during our allotted time. But he and I hopefully will get together to do some specials. But can you believe that? You know, having 911 workers work 12-hour shifts, you call in with an emergency and they're asleep. So anyways, enough of that. But I will have an interview with David Kaplan tomorrow of ESPN 1000. Dave and I will talk about all the latest. I really want to get his impressions on the Eberflus era. And if you listen to those Monday morning interviews that Eberflus would have with Kaplan, those got very, very interesting. And I would see them on video and see Kaplan's visceral reaction to the dumb answers Eberflus was asking. So we should have a fun interview for tomorrow night's Bare Their Souls, 8 p.m. Central, here on the Barroom Network.
Looking forward to that one. And for day-to-day coverage of the Chicago Bears, head over to bearswire.com. Currently, we've got stories up covering every angle of the last week, from the Matt Eberflus firing, Thomas Brown's promotion, Kevin Warren and Brian Poles. And yes, we do have a game on Sunday that we are previewing as well. So for all of us here at the Bar Room in Buffone 55, and for John Buffone, who we cannot wait to welcome back next Tuesday, we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye, everybody.